My phone buzzed with a text. "Happy 5 years, my beautiful wife. I'm drowning in paperwork at the office, but you're my everything." I read the words through blurred vision, my hands trembling, because the man who sent it wasn't at the office. He was sitting 2 tables away, passionately kissing a blonde I didn't recognize. Nobody ever tells you how remarkably quiet the moment your life ends actually is. In the movies, there's a swelling soundtrack, a dramatic gasp, a shattering of glass. But in real life, the world keeps spinning. The waiter keeps pouring the Cabernet. The jazz band in the corner keeps playing a sultry saxophone solo, and the couple at the next table keeps arguing about where to send their kids for private school. My husband, Arthur, and I had been married for exactly 5 years. We met in our late 20s, both ambitious, both tired of the dating scene, and seemingly perfectly matched. He was a senior partner at a mid-sized corporate law firm in Chicago, and I ran a boutique marketing agency. We were the couple our friends envied. We hosted dinner parties with perfectly paired wines, took annual trips to Tuscany, and had a beautiful, meticulously decorated brownstone in Lincoln Park. But over the last 6 months, a subtle chill had settled over our home. Arthur had become a ghost. He was always working, always stressed, always just trying to close this massive merger. "Honey, it's going to set us up for life." I tried to be the supportive wife. I made sure dinners were kept warm in the oven. I managed the household entirely on my own, and I swallowed my loneliness, telling myself it was just a season. Our 5th anniversary was supposed to be the end of that season. A month prior, Arthur had booked a table at L'Étoile, the most exclusive French restaurant in the city. I had bought a new dress, a stunning, deep emerald silk slip dress that hugged every curve, the kind of dress that used to make his eyes darken with desire. I spent 3 hours getting ready, my stomach fluttering with the anticipation of reconnecting with the man I loved. Then, at 5:30 p.m., the phone call came. "Sarah, God, I am so incredibly sorry." Arthur's voice came through the speaker, sounding breathless and genuinely distressed. "The opposing counsel just dropped a massive injunction on us. It's an absolute disaster. I'm not going to make it out of here before midnight." I sat on the edge of our king-sized bed, smoothing the emerald silk over my knee. The disappointment was a physical weight in my chest. "Arthur, it's our anniversary." "I know, baby. I know. I feel like absolute garbage. Let me make it up to you this weekend. We'll go to the Hamptons, just you and me. I promise." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Okay. Good luck with the injunction." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet bedroom for 20 minutes. I felt pathetic, dressed to the nines with nowhere to go. I called my best friend, Jessica, seeking comfort. Jessica, fiercely loyal and entirely devoid of a filter, was having none of my self-pity. "You are not sitting in that house ordering Thai takeout in an $80 blowout, Sarah," she commanded. "I am putting on hard pants, and we are going out. Meet me at the Obsidian Lounge in 45 minutes. We're drinking overpriced martinis, and you are going to look spectacular doing it." The Obsidian Lounge was a dimly lit, hyper-trendy spot downtown, known for its velvet booths, obscenely expensive craft cocktails, and an atmosphere so dark you could barely read the menu without a flashlight. It was the exact opposite of L'Étoile, which was exactly what I needed. Jessica and I claimed a small curved booth near the back. I was 2 sips into a gin martini, laughing at one of Jessica's terrible Hinge dates, when she excused herself to use the restroom. Left alone, I leaned back against the plush velvet, letting my eyes wander over the crowd. That was when the breath left my lungs. 2 tables away, nestled into a deep corner booth, was a man. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit, the exact charcoal suit I had picked up from the dry cleaners for Arthur 2 days ago. He had the same broad shoulders, the same slight graying at the temples. His back was mostly to me, but as he shifted to lean closer to his companion, his profile caught the ambient light of the table candle. It was Arthur. My brain violently rejected the visual information. "It's a coincidence," my mind screamed. "It's a doppelganger. Arthur is at the firm, drowning in paperwork. He told you so." But then the woman leaned into the light. She was young, maybe 25, with a cascade of perfectly styled blonde hair and a tight, red cocktail dress. She was gazing at him with a mixture of adoration and raw hunger. And Arthur, my stressed, overworked husband, who was supposedly fighting a legal injunction, reached out and gently tucked a stray blonde curl behind her ear. The gesture was so achingly intimate, so incredibly familiar, that it felt like a physical blow to my ribs. I froze. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't blink. The ambient noise of the lounge faded into a high-pitched ringing in my ears. Then, my purse vibrated on the table. Still staring at the couple, I blindly reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. The screen lit up with a text from Arthur. "Happy 5 years, my beautiful wife. I'm drowning in paperwork at the office, but you're my everything. Can't wait to hold you tonight." I looked from the screen to the table across the room. I watched, paralyzed, as Arthur set his phone face down on the table, smiled at the blonde, leaned across the small space between them, and kissed her. It wasn't a quick peck. It was deep, hungry, and devastatingly passionate. The text, the kiss, the absolute staggering audacity of it all. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my martini glass at his head. A strange, glacial calm washed over me, freezing the tears before they could even form. I was watching the murder of my marriage in real time, and my only instinct was to gather evidence. With hands that possessed an eerie, robotic steadiness, I raised my phone. I zoomed in just enough to capture their faces clearly in the dim light. I snapped 3 photos. Then, I switched to video. I recorded 10 seconds of Arthur whispering something in her ear, making her throw her head back in a delighted, bell-like laugh. Click. Save. Back up to cloud. Just as the upload finished, Jessica slid back into the booth, fixing her lipstick. "Okay, the lighting in that bathroom is a hate crime, Sarah? Oh my God, you look like a ghost. Are you sick?" I grabbed her wrist beneath the table, squeezing hard enough to make her wince. "Don't look," I hissed, my voice trembling with suppressed adrenaline. "Do not turn your head, Jess." "What? What is it?" she whispered, her eyes widening in alarm. "Arthur is here, 2 tables behind you, with a woman." Jessica's jaw dropped. The fierce, protective anger I expected from her flared instantly in her eyes. She started to turn her head, her body tensing like a coiled spring. "I'm going to kill him. I'm going to rip his hair out." "No!" I pulled her arm down sharply. "Jessica, listen to me. I need to leave right now, before he sees me. If we make a scene, he'll spin it. He'll make excuses. He'll have time to cover his tracks." "Sarah, he's kissing another woman on your anniversary," she hissed, tears of sympathetic rage springing to her eyes. "I know," I said, my voice dropping to a dead flat whisper. "I have it on video. Throw a 50 on the table for the drinks. We are walking out the side door. Now." We slipped out of the obsidian lounge like shadows. The cold Chicago night air hit me like a slap to the face, finally breaking the numbness. As soon as I was securely inside Jessica's car, I broke down. It was ugly, visceral crying, the kind that tears at your throat and leaves you gasping for air. Jessica held me, stroking my hair, murmuring curses against Arthur's name. "What do you want to do?" she asked gently, when my sobs finally subsided into dry heaves. "Do you want to stay at my place? I have the guest room ready." I stared out the window at the passing streetlights, wiping away the ruined mascara. The initial shock was fading, replaced by a cold, radiating fury. "No," I said quietly. "Take me home. I have to be in bed when he gets there." "Sarah, are you insane? You can't look at him right now." "I have to," I replied, pulling down the sun visor to inspect my ravaged face in the mirror. "Because if he knows I know, he'll lock down our finances. He's a corporate lawyer, Jess. He knows exactly how to hide assets. I need to know who she is, and I need to know exactly what he's been planning." I got home at 9 p.m. I scrubbed the makeup off my face, put on my oldest, most oversized pajamas, and got into bed. I laid in the dark for 3 hours, my heart hammering against my ribs every time I heard a car drive by. I used the time to mentally catalog everything. The late nights, the sudden changes in his passwords, the way he guarded his briefcase lately. I had been so trusting, so incredibly blind. At 12:15 a.m., the front door unlocked. I regulated my breathing, feigning sleep. The bedroom door creaked open. I smelled him before I felt him. Beneath the sharp scent of strong peppermint, there was a lingering trace of something sweet and floral. Vanilla and jasmine. Not my perfume. Arthur stripped out of his charcoal suit and slipped into bed beside me. He sighed heavily, the sound of a completely exhausted man. "Sarah?" he whispered softly. I stirred, pretending to wake up. You're home." "Yeah. Just walked in." He reached out, his hand resting on my waist. My skin crawled so violently I thought I might vomit, but I forced myself to remain still. "I'm so sorry about tonight, baby. The injunction was a nightmare. I barely had time to breathe." "It's okay," I murmured into the darkness. "We'll celebrate later." "I love you," he whispered, kissing the back of my head, the same lips that had been on the blonde hours earlier. "Love you too," I lied. The next morning, Arthur left for the office at 7 a.m., looking suitably tired. The second the door clicked shut, I went to work. I wasn't just a marketing director. My entire career was built on digital forensics, market research, and understanding digital footprints. Arthur thought I just designed pretty ad campaigns. He had forgotten that I knew exactly how to track people online. I started with our shared laptop. Arthur was careful, but no one is perfectly invisible. He had cleared his browser history, but he hadn't cleared the cache or the deep system temporary files. Within an hour, I found what I was looking for, a digital receipt for an Uber ride taken 2 weeks ago, sent to an email address he thought he had deleted from the mail app. The destination wasn't a law firm. It was an upscale apartment building in the South Loop. Next, I tackled the phone records. Our carrier account was in my name, a holdover from before we were married. I downloaded the itemized billing PDF. There was one number he texted incessantly, hundreds of messages a week, peaking during the hours he claimed to be in deep focus mode at the office. I took the number and ran it through a reverse lookup directory I used for marketing leads. Blanche Reynolds, age 24. I cross-referenced the name on LinkedIn. There she was, the blonde from the lounge. Her job title? Junior paralegal at Harrison and Cole Arthur's law firm. Bile rose in my throat, but I forced it down. I couldn't afford to fall apart. I was a woman on a mission now. But the true devastation didn't come from finding Blanche. It came when I managed to guess the password to Arthur's iPad. It was our wedding anniversary, date backwards, the irony was sickening, and opened a standalone banking app I didn't recognize. It was an account with a boutique offshore bank, and it was heavily funded. My hands shook as I scrolled through the transaction history. Over the past 8 months, Arthur had been systematically siphoning money out of our joint investment accounts, the ones he managed because he had the financial background, and funneling them through a shell LLC into this private account. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. The money we were saving for a house in the suburbs, the money we were saving to start a family. And there, at the top of the recent transactions, was a wire transfer for $45,000. The memo line read, "South Loop Condo, 12-month lease paid in full." He wasn't just having a midlife crisis affair, he was setting up a completely separate life with Blanche, using our life savings to fund it. He was planning to leave me, and he was meticulously ensuring I would be left with absolutely nothing when he did. I sat back in the chair, the glow of the iPad illuminating my cold, tearless face. The heartbroken, betrayed wife who cried in Jessica's car was gone. In her place was something much harder, much sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. Arthur thought he was the smartest person in the room. He thought he could outmaneuver me, drain my accounts, and toss me aside while playing the tragic victim of a failing marriage. He had a meticulous, ruthless plan to destroy my life. It was time to build a better one, and I was going to burn his world to the ground in the process. The morning after I discovered Arthur's offshore accounts, I made him his favorite breakfast, Eggs Benedict with a side of freshly squeezed orange juice. I smiled as I set the plate down in front of him. I kissed his cheek, breathing in the scent of his expensive cologne, a scent I now associated entirely with deception. "You look beautiful this morning, Sarah," he said, slicing into a poached egg. "Did you sleep well?" "Like the dead," I replied. my voice perfectly steady. The moment his Audi pulled out of the driveway, I was on the phone. I didn't call a marriage counselor. I called Richard Sterling. Richard was a legend in Chicago's legal circles, a silver-haired, bespoke-suited shark of a divorce attorney who was notoriously expensive and terrifyingly efficient. He was the man you hired when you didn't just want half, you wanted scorched earth. I secured a discreet afternoon appointment, paying his exorbitant retainer in cash from a personal emergency fund Arthur didn't know existed. Sitting in Richard's mahogany-paneled office overlooking the Chicago River, I laid out the iPad screenshots, the Uber receipts, and the itemized phone bills. I didn't cry. The time for crying had ended in Jessica's car. Richard adjusted his tortoiseshell glasses, his sharp blue eyes scanning the documents. "He's arrogant," Richard finally noted, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. "Corporate lawyers often are. They think family law is beneath them, so they make sloppy mistakes when they try to hide assets." He moved over $400,000 into a boutique offshore account in the Caymans, I said, pointing to the highlighted spreadsheet I had compiled. "He's drained our joint investment portfolio, disguised as market losses and phantom bad tech investments he managed for us." Richard leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Sarah, this is standard financial infidelity. We can easily subpoena these records and claw that money back during the discovery phase. But there's something else we need to check." He buzzed his intercom. "Penelope, run a full property title search and credit check on Sarah's social security number. Expedite it." 10 minutes later, Penelope, a paralegal with a no-nonsense demeanor, walked in and placed a manila folder on the desk. The color completely drained from Richard's face as he read it. He slid the paper across the desk to me. "Arthur didn't just drain your joint accounts, Sarah," Richard said softly. 3 months ago, a second mortgage was taken out on your Lincoln Park brownstone for $350,000. The money was wired to the same Shell LLC he used to fund his girlfriend's condo. I stared at the document. My name was signed at the bottom, but it wasn't my handwriting. It was a flawless forgery. "He forged my signature," I whispered, the sheer scale of his betrayal threatening to suffocate me. "He mortgaged my home, the home I put the down payment on before we were married to fund his escape." "Which elevates this from a messy divorce to felony wire fraud and forgery," Richard stated, a dangerous smile touching the corners of his mouth. "He's crossed a line that can get him disbarred, and we are going to let him dig the hole a little deeper before we bury him in it." On Richard's advice, I hired a private investigator named David Miller, an ex-Chicago PD detective who specialized in corporate surveillance. I needed to know exactly how deep Arthur and Blanche's relationship went. Within a week, David handed me a flash drive containing a devastating digital dossier. He had cracked Blanche's private social media accounts. There were photos of her and Arthur in the Hamptons on the very weekend Arthur claimed he had an emergency work retreat. There were photos of her wearing a diamond tennis bracelet I had specifically asked for at Christmas. Arthur had told me it was out of budget. But the most sickening discovery was a video Blanche had posted to her private story just 2 days ago. She was sitting in the lavishly decorated South Loop condo, holding up a glass of champagne. "Cheers to my amazing fiancé," she giggled to the camera, panning over to show Arthur sitting on a white leather sofa, loosening his tie. "One more month until the old ball and chain is officially out of the picture, and we can start looking at rings." Fiancé. He was promising to marry a 24-year-old paralegal while sleeping in my bed, eating the food I cooked, and methodically bankrupting me. The psychological warfare of the next 4 weeks was the most exhausting marathon of my life. Every evening was an Oscar-worthy performance. I played the doting, supportive wife. I asked him about his day. I rubbed his shoulders when he complained about the stress of the big merger at Harrison and Cole. I smiled while he texted her under the dinner table, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. I swallowed my disgust, compartmentalizing the rage into a dark, locked box in my mind. Every night he fell asleep next to me. I lay awake, watching the ceiling, mentally refining the architecture of his ruin. I wasn't just going to serve him divorce papers. I was going to humiliate him. I was going to take everything he valued, his money, his reputation, and his precious career. The perfect opportunity presented itself in the form of a heavy, cream-colored envelope delivered to our mailbox in late October. It was the formal invitation to the Harrison & Cole annual charity gala held at the opulent Crystal Ballroom in the Drake Hotel. This wasn't just any gala. This was the night Bradley Cole, the firm's founding partner, was officially stepping down, and Arthur was slated to be announced as the new managing partner. It was the pinnacle of Arthur's career. The city's legal elite, judges, and high-net-worth clients would all be in attendance. Arthur stood in our kitchen, holding the invitation, his chest puffed out with self-importance. "This is it, Sarah, managing partner. It's a massive pay bump. All those late nights at the office, all the stress. It's finally paying off." He looked me right in the eyes, wearing a mask of perfect sincerity. "I couldn't have done this without you holding down the fort." "I am so incredibly proud of you, Arthur," I beamed, walking over to straighten his collar. "We are going to celebrate properly. I'm going to make sure it's a night you will absolutely never forget." He kissed my forehead, completely oblivious to the venom laced in my words. I had 1 week to finalize the trap. While Arthur was at the office, pretending to be a titan of industry, I was in his home study. Months ago, right after the anniversary incident, I had slipped a tiny, hardware-based keylogger into the USB port on the back of his desktop computer monitor. It was virtually undetectable unless you were physically looking for it. I pulled the drive, plugged it into my encrypted laptop, and ran the data through a parsing software. I had every keystroke, every password, every secure login he had typed for the last 30 days. With Richard Sterling's quiet blessing and plausible deniability, I logged into Arthur's secure firm email portal. What I was looking for was the final nail in his coffin, the ultimate leverage. Arthur was greedy, and greedy men cut corners. It took me 6 hours of digging through heavily redacted financial ledgers, but I found it buried in a subfolder labeled Miscellaneous Consultations. The shell LLC Arthur had created to siphon our marital funds, Apex Holdings LLC, wasn't just a dummy corporation. Arthur had actively billed Harrison & Cole's biggest client, a massive tech conglomerate called Synthetics, for legal consulting fees payable to Apex Holdings LLC. He was essentially embezzling client funds to pad his offshore account, mixing marital theft with outright corporate fraud. He was double-dipping, stealing from me and stealing from his firm's most lucrative client. If Bradley Cole found out, Arthur wouldn't just be fired, he would be facing federal prison time. I downloaded the billing invoices, the wire transfer receipts, and the email chains where Arthur authorized the payments himself. I compiled it all into a meticulously organized, undeniable PDF dossier. Then, I added the personal touches, the forged mortgage documents, the photos of him and Blanche at the Obsidian Lounge, and screenshots of his texts to her, detailing exactly how he was manipulating his stupid, trusting wife. I loaded the entire horrifying package onto 20 sleek, black, custom-engraved USB drives. I used my agency's printing connections to create a beautiful, professional-looking digital booklet titled The Ethics of Arthur Vance, a Financial and Moral Audit. The evening of the gala arrived. Chicago was blanketed in a crisp, elegant layer of early snow. I wore a backless, floor-length gown in a shade of deep, bruised plum. I had my hair swept up, my makeup flawlessly applied to highlight the sharp angles of my face. I looked like a weapon. Arthur, wearing a brand-new Tom Ford tuxedo, paid for, no doubt, by Synthetics or my second mortgage, looked at me with genuine appreciation. "You look stunning, Sarah. You're going to be the most beautiful woman in the room." "Thank you, darling," I smiled, slipping my clutch, which contained 3 of the black USB drives, into my hand. "Let's go make history." The Crystal Ballroom at the Drake was a masterclass in gilded excess. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, sparkling light over hundreds of Chicago's elite. Waiters in white coats circulated with trays of Dom Perignon. A string quartet played softly in the corner. As we walked in, Arthur tucked my hand into the crook of his arm, playing the perfect power couple. We mingled, we laughed, we shook hands with judges and tech CEOs. And then, I saw her. Blanche was standing near the ice sculpture, wearing a dress that violated at least 3 of the firm's unwritten dress codes. She was supposed to be there, working the registration desk, but she had abandoned her post to sip champagne and stare longingly at Arthur from across the room. Arthur's grip on my arm tightened fractionally when he noticed her. He quickly averted his eyes, steering me toward the bar. "I need to go speak with Bradley for a moment," Arthur said, his voice carrying a slight edge of panic. "Get yourself a drink, sweetie. I'll be right back." "Take your time," I said smoothly. As soon as he disappeared into the crowd, I moved. I didn't have much time before the speeches began. Jessica, who had secured a +1 invite through a vendor contact of mine, materialized beside me. "The valet has the bags," Jessica whispered, her eyes flashing with adrenaline. "And I've slipped the drives into the VIP gift bags behind the coat check. The moment they go to leave, every senior partner is taking Arthur's dirty laundry home with them." "Perfect," I breathed. I walked over to the audio-visual booth, situated discreetly behind a velvet curtain near the stage. The AV tech, a young guy named Marcus, whom I had hired for my agency's corporate events dozens of times, gave me a subtle nod. "You sure about this, Sarah?" Marcus asked in a low voice, looking at the primary flash drive I handed him. "More sure than I've ever been about anything in my entire life," I said. "Cue it up on the main projector. When Bradley introduces Arthur, wait for Arthur to take the microphone. Then, kill the stage lights and hit play." I walked back into the center of the ballroom, taking a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. I positioned myself right next to Blanche, who shot me a look of pure, unadulterated disdain. She thought she had won. She thought I was a pathetic, clueless relic standing in the way of her luxury life. I turned to her and offered a devastatingly polite smile. "Lovely dress, Blanche," I said, my voice dripping with honey. "It's so brave of you to wear something so affordable to a black tie event." Her jaw tightened, a flush of angry pink rising on her cheeks. "Arthur has excellent taste," she shot back, a thinly veiled threat. "Oh, he does," I agreed, taking a sip of my champagne. "But he has terrible judgment. Enjoy the show, darling." A hush fell over the room as Bradley Cole, a towering man in his 70s with a voice like rolling thunder, tapped the microphone on the grand stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bradley boomed, the crowd quieting instantly. "Tonight is about the future of Harrison and Cole. It is about integrity. It is about dedication. And no one embodies those qualities more than the man who will be taking over my mantle. Please, raise your glasses and welcome your new managing partner, Arthur." The room erupted into applause. Arthur, looking like a king ascending to his throne, walked up the steps to the stage. He buttoned his tuxedo jacket, projecting humility and power. He shook Bradley's hand, stepped up to the podium, and adjusted the microphone. He looked out over the crowd, his eyes finding mine. He smiled. "Thank you, Bradley," Arthur began, his voice echoing through the massive ballroom, "and thank you to all of you. But most importantly, I want to thank my beautiful wife, Sarah, without whose unwavering support," click. The spotlight on Arthur instantly snapped off, plunging the stage into darkness. Before the crowd could even murmur in confusion, the massive, 20-foot digital projector screen behind Arthur flared to life with blinding brilliance. The first thing that flashed on the screen wasn't a corporate logo. It was a crystal-clear, blown-up photograph of Arthur and Blanche in the dimly lit corner booth of the Obsidian Lounge, their lips locked in a passionate kiss. The silence in the crystal ballroom was so absolute, so profoundly deafening, that you could hear the ice melting in the glasses. The ballroom fell into stunned silence as Arthur and Blanche's photo blazed across the massive screen, betrayal impossible to ignore. Arthur turned slowly, panic unraveling his composure. His voice, caught by the microphone, trembled as he demanded the feed be cut, but no one came. The next slide appeared. Messages, clear and damning. Gasps rippled through the crowd. His excuses, hacking, lies sounded hollow even to himself. Then came the documents. Forged signatures. Hidden accounts. Stolen money. I stood quietly near the ice sculpture, champagne in hand, watching everything collapse exactly as planned. Around me, disbelief turned to disgust. Blanche's confidence shattered. Arthur's world followed. When the final evidence appeared, the room erupted. "Arthur," the voice cut through the chaos. Judgment had arrived. "Are you embezzling from our clients?" Bradley roared, his voice carrying without a microphone. Right next to Bradley sat William T. Rutherford, the CEO of Synthetics. William was a notoriously ruthless billionaire who did not tolerate being made a fool of. He stood up slowly, buttoning his suit jacket with a chilling calmness. He didn't look at Arthur. He looked directly at Bradley Cole. "Bradley," William said, his voice dropping the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. "You will be hearing from my general counsel in the morning. I expect a full, third-party forensic audit of every dime my company has paid this firm in the last 5 years. If 1 cent is missing, I will bury you all." William turned on his heel and walked out of the ballroom, his security detail falling into step behind him. Panic erupted. The band started playing a clumsy, off-tempo jazz tune in a desperate attempt to drown out the chaos. Board members were shouting. Spouses were whispering frantically, pulling out their phones to take pictures of the screen. Arthur stumbled backward away from the podium, ripping the microphone from his lapel and throwing it to the floor. The feedback shrieked through the speakers, making people cover their ears. He scanned the crowd, his eyes wild and desperate, until they locked onto me. I was standing perfectly still, the picture of serene, untouchable calm. "Sarah!" He screamed over the noise, pushing his way down the stage steps and shoving past a waiter. "Sarah, you crazy bitch! What did you do? You ruined my life!" He lunged toward me, but he never made it. 2 enormous, broad-shouldered men in dark suits, Bradley Cole's private security, intercepted him, slamming him hard against a linen-draped cocktail table. Crystal glasses shattered onto the hardwood floor. "Get your hands off me! I'm the managing partner!" Arthur spat, struggling against their grip. "Not anymore. You're not," Bradley Cole growled, marching through the crowd until he stood towering over Arthur. "You're fired, effective immediately. And considering you just admitted to defrauding a Fortune 500 company on my watch, I've already authorized security to call the Chicago Police Department. You are not leaving this hotel until they arrive." "Bradley, please, it's a misunderstanding," Arthur begged, tears of genuine terror streaming down his face. "It was just a shell account. I was going to pay it back." "Tell it to the feds, you pathetic excuse for a lawyer," Bradley sneered. He turned his attention to the crowd. "Where is the paralegal? Where is Blanche Reynolds?" Blanche had been trying to slowly inch her way toward the service exit, keeping her head down. But at the sound of her name, the crowd parted like the Red Sea, leaving her completely exposed. "Hold her, too," Bradley barked at a third security guard. "She notarized those forged mortgage documents. I want her hard drive seized." Blanche burst into hysterical, ugly tears. "I didn't know," she sobbed, mascara running down her face in thick black rivers. "He told me they were just routine filings. He manipulated me. Save the performance for the judge, sweetheart," Jessica, my best friend, said loudly as she walked past Blanche to stand by my side. Jessica linked her arm through mine, her eyes gleaming with dark satisfaction. "Shall we, Sarah?" "We shall," I replied. I set my half-empty champagne flute down on the base of the ice sculpture. I didn't look back at Arthur as he wept and pleaded with the security guards. I didn't look at Blanche, who was now crumpled on the floor in her cheap red dress, screaming that her life was over. I simply adjusted the strap of my gown, kept my head held high, and walked out of the crystal ballroom. Behind me, I could hear the distant, wailing sirens of police cruisers pulling up to the front of the Drake Hotel. The aftermath was a brutal, swift execution of justice. Arthur's arrogance was his ultimate downfall. Because he had involved a major corporate client in his scheme, the embezzlement crossed state lines, triggering a federal investigation. He was formally indicted on 4 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of corporate embezzlement, and 1 count of felony forgery. When the FBI raided the Apex Holdings LLC offshore accounts, they seized everything. The money he had stolen from our marriage was frozen, but thanks to Richard Sterling's ruthless litigation, the courts recognized me as the primary victim of the financial fraud. In the divorce settlement, the judge awarded me absolute sole ownership of the Lincoln Park brownstone, required Arthur to liquidate his remaining legitimate retirement accounts to repay the second mortgage he fraudulently took out, and ordered him to cover 100% of my legal fees. He was disbarred before the criminal trial even began. His name became a cautionary tale whispered in law schools across the state. Blanche didn't fare much better. While she avoided federal prison by turning state's evidence against Arthur, she was blacklisted from every law firm in the Midwest. The last I heard, she had moved back to her hometown in Ohio, working as a receptionist at a dog grooming salon, drowning in the legal debt she accrued, trying to keep herself out of a cell. Arthur ultimately took a plea deal to avoid a publicized trial. He was sentenced to 7 years in a federal correctional facility in Indiana. A month after his sentencing, I sat in the living room of my beautifully quiet brownstone. I had repainted the walls, replaced the furniture, and scrubbed every trace of his existence from my home. I was reviewing the quarterly projections for my marketing agency, which had just signed 3 massive new corporate clients, one of which was Synthetics, personally referred to me by William T. Rutherford himself. I looked down at my phone as it buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from Jessica. "Drinks at the Obsidian Lounge tonight. Heard they have a new martini." I smiled, typing my reply. "I'll wear the emerald dress. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I prefer it elegantly catered with a side of federal indictments." Arthur traded a devoted wife and a prestigious career for a leased condo and a prison jumpsuit. I kept the brownstone, my dignity, and my peace of mind. True karma doesn't just break your heart. It audits your life and leaves you with the exact balance you deserve.